Hello and welcome. I am Raghav, and today we are going to learn something very interesting. We are going to implement data driven testing in our Selenium automation framework, and that means we are going to get our data from Excel or CSV files, and that data we will be using for our testing. So here it is called data driven testing because we will make our data drive the testing so that we will separate our data out of our test scripts, and we will keep our data separately, and then we can manage the data separately, and based on the data we give we will be running our tests. So first we will learn how to read data from Excel or CSV files, and then we will see how to use this data for testing, and then we will also learn how to run test with multiple sets of data and show in reports. Okay, and then I will also show you a way where you can get data from a data provider method within the script. In case you do not have a lot of data and you want to use data from the script itself, you can do that, and also we can give data from our testng.xml file. So this is something we will learn from very basics, from very scratch, and we will go step by step. So do not worry if you are a complete beginner. Let's get started and let us see. Step number one is, in our automation framework we will go to our pom.xml file, and then we will add the dependency for Excel and for reading writing Excel files. So that is, we will get this POI library from Apache. So let us very quickly go. I will open my project. So this is the Selenium automation framework we are doing, and let's go to our pom.xml file here, and here these are all the dependencies we have added in the earlier sessions. So I will go to the end here, and then I will go to Maven dependency or Maven repositories, and here I will search for POI. Now here you can see we have this apache.poi, and we also have this POI OOXML, that is OpenOffice XML. So this is what we need, OOXML. So this is what we have to get. You can get whatever is the latest version. So let's say I will get the latest version, which is this 5.4.0, and copy this, and I will paste it in my pom.xml. I am pressing Ctrl A to select everything, and then Ctrl plus Shift plus F key on my keyboard to correct the formatting, and then I am pressing Ctrl S to save the project. And as I press Ctrl S, you can see it is now getting the dependency added in our project. Okay, so this is done. You can also check in Maven dependencies. You will find this OpenOffice XML. Yes, so you can see here we have got all these related jars added. Okay, so we are done with step number one. Now at this point, in case you see any errors in your project after adding the dependency, you can go to the command line and go to the location of your project. From command line you can run this command mvn clean install or mvn -u clean install, and then you can update your Maven project. So if there are no errors and everything is fine, then you can skip this particular thing. Okay, now after this, step number two is we will now create a Excel file. Okay, so you can create Excel file anywhere in your system, on your system, and then we can give the path of that Excel file in our script. However, it is recommended, and it will be very efficient if you keep the Excel file within your project folder, so that whenever you move your folder, your project, the test data or the Excel file will go along with the project. Okay, so let me just go here to the project folder, and I will do a right click, and I'm going to I'll first create a new folder, and I will call it as test data. Okay, and inside this folder we will create a Excel file. So I'll let me first open this folder on the system. So I can go like this, or you can manually go to this folder on your system, and here I'm going to create a Excel file. Now if you have Microsoft Office installed on your system, you can create with that. In case you do not have Microsoft Office and you want to use some free software, you can go to LibreOffice. So you can check what works for you. We have multiple options for this. We have LibreOffice, we have WPS Office, that is also a free option for working with Office files. This is one option. Then we have WPS Office. Okay, so you can also download this from here. Okay, so you can get this one. I have this WPS Office already added, installed on my system. So this is what I'm using, and using this, I'm going to create a Excel file. So if you have Office, Microsoft Office, Open Office, anything, you can use that. I will do a right click here in this test data folder and say new, and I'm going to create a XLSX worksheet. Okay, XLS will also work, but accordingly we will have to tweak our code. Let us go with this XLSX worksheet, and I will call this as test data. You can name it anything. Okay, and let us open it. Now, based on our requirements, based on the data we need to be added in our test, we will create test data here. Okay, so let's say for in our case, the test that we have, if I go to the tests package here, and this is our login test that we had created in the earlier sessions. So here it's a simple login test where we are using this username and password. So this is our test data here in this particular test case. So this is what we will be getting from our Excel file. So let's say I will create two columns for this test data, username and password. Okay, so this is what we need. Now for username, you can give some values. Let's say user1, pass1. I will say user2, pass2, and also let us use one valid data, so we can also check that one run of this test case should pass. So this is the valid data, which is username is admin@yourstore.com and password is admin. Okay, make sure that you save and close this file. So saving is important. Now we have done step number 2. Now step number 3 is we will create a class called excelutils.java to read the data from our Excel file. Okay, so let us go to our src main java, and in this we have the utils package. Here I am going to create inside the utils package I will create a new class, and we will name it as Excel utils. So we created this class here. Now I'll just expand this. Inside this class we will be writing our code. Okay, so here first we will create these variables for workbook and sheet. So I will say you can make it private static workbook, and we will call it workbook, and then private static sheet type variable, and I am calling it sheet. Okay, and of course we will be getting errors here. So if I hover over the workbook, and we are getting this option to get it from our Apache POI library, and this will come only after you have added the dependency in your pom.xml. Similarly, when I hover over sheet, I'm getting this option to get it from the Apache POI library. Okay, so this is also, we will get it from here. And then after this we will create a function to get our Excel file. So we will say the name we are giving load Excel, it can be anything that you want. So I will say public static void load Excel, and here we are getting the path and the sheet name. Both we are taking as string parameters here. So file path and sheet name we are taking as input arguments or parameters to this function. And then here we will use this file input stream to get the file path. I will say file input stream. If I press Ctrl space on my keyboard, I will get this file input stream from Java IO. And let us call it as file equals new file input stream, and then we will pass the file path here. Okay, so, and you can see it is throwing an error because we need either a throws declaration or surrounded with try catch. So I'm just adding a throws declaration, and it is adding this file not found exception here. Okay, so this is required because in case this file path is incorrect or the file is not found here, it will throw a file not found exception, and we have to catch it, and we have to catch it and then handle it. Therefore we have to add this exception here. All right, now we will use workbook. So let us say this is what we had already declared. I will say workbook equals new XSSF workbook. Okay, and then here I will pass the file. Okay, and here again it is asking us to manage the exception. So what we can do here is, instead of throwing file not found exception, I will just say IO exception. So this should handle both of these, and for this we also need to import it from Java IO. Okay, so this is done. And then now here we are using XSSF workbook just in case you have other extension of Excel file, like in case you are using the .xls instead of .xlsx extension, then we will need to use the HSSF workbook here. Okay, so this is what we will be using, but we are using the XLSX extension, so this should work fine. All right, so this is what we have done. Now we need to get, so we have got the workbook object. Now from that workbook we need to extract the sheet. So we will say sheet equals workbook.getSheet. So sheet is what we have already defined above. I will say sheet equals, and workbook is already available now, workbook.getSheet. And you can see we can get sheet by the name of the sheet of the Excel file, or we can also get the sheet by the index number. An index number that is position of sheet starts from 0. So the first sheet will be index 0, and then 1 and 2 and so on. Okay, but let us say get it by name, and we will get the sheet name here. Whatever sheet name gets passed here as an argument of this function will come here. All right, so here we have also got the sheet. Okay, I think here instead of it is throwing exception because here this mismatch. So let us say instead of this sheet SL sheet, we need SS sheet. So I will again get this sheet library, and I will use this one, which is org.apache.py.ss.usermodel. Okay, and now this is fine. So now we have also got the sheet. Now this was the function just to get the Excel file and get the sheet, and then from in next function we are going to get the row and column, and then by that we will get the cell from which we need to get the data. So we are going to create a function called get cell data, and we will take the row number and the column number as the input parameters to this function. So I will say, so this function is done. Next function is public static, and string is going to be the return type of this function get cell data, and I will say int row count or int row int column as the argument of this function. Okay, and in this we are going to get the cell by getting the row count and column count from the sheet. So we will say, we will use cell and we will say equals to, sorry, I will go here, and we are going to say sheet dot get row, and we will get the row number, and dot get cell, and we will give the column number here, and we will have to get the cell from this Apache POI. So make sure that you get it from this Apache POI library, and this is done. Okay, and here it is throwing an error because we have not yet added the return, which should be of string type here. Okay, so now we are going to create a if block. That means if it is of type string, then we will get the string value, and if it is of type number, then again we are going to convert it into a string. So this is going to be very important, that what is your data, what is the type of data you are having in your cells, so we can handle it here. So ultimately we are going to convert it into string, and we are going to pass it as a string. Now I had created another video just for Excel read and write. If you search for Excel read write by my name, you should find it. Yes, this is the video where I have explained how to read Excel in Java. Here I have also shown how to handle numerical values, how to handle string values. So this will be very handy for you if you want to learn more about Excel handling in Java. But for now, we should be able to handle this by using this if statement. So I will say here, if cell dot get cell type, and I will say equals cell type dot string. So if it is of type string, then we are just going to return cell dot get string cell value. This is the one we need. So we are just going to return the string value from here, and then we are going to say else if cell dot get cell type equals cell type dot numeric. If that is the case, that means the data is number numeric format. Then we are going to say cell dot get numeric cell value. So this will get the value, whatever numeric value we have, and then so this will be integer type. So or we are typecasting it. Okay, and then we are putting all this into brackets, and I will say here string dot value of, and we'll put a semicolon here, and this is what we are going to return. Okay, so basically what we are doing is we are getting the data which is of numeric type and then converting or typecasting it into string type and then returning it here. Okay, and then after that, otherwise we are going to just return null. So if nothing happens, then just return a null string, and that's it. I'm going to press Ctrl A and Ctrl Shift F to correct the formatting and save the file. Okay, so this is what we are doing here. Now we also need to get the row count, so we will also create a function get row count. So I will say here public static int is the return type and the function name is get row count. Okay, and here we will just return the number of rows. So we will just say sheet dot get physical number of rows. So I'm saying return sheet dot get physical number of rows. Okay, and then similarly we will, once we get the row count, we will also have a function to close the workbook. So we will say public static void close Excel, close Excel, and here we are just going to say workbook dot close, and here it is throwing an error because it is saying add throws declaration. So we are just throwing the IO exception here. Okay, make sure that you save your project. Okay, so this is our Excel utils, and this we will make use to get a workbook or a Excel file and then read data from that Excel file. Okay, now we have done this. Now we will go to our login test or whatever test you want, wherever you want to use the data from Excel. We will go to that test script or test class, and then we will update so that we can get the data from Excel. So we will create a function. So let us go to our login test. So in our case, we have this login test here. I am going here. Okay, now here before the test function, we will create this function called get login data, and here you can see the return type is a two-dimensional object. Okay, because we have username and password, two columns, so we are getting this two-dimensional object as the return type. So I will say public, and this is the return type with like this, and we can give it some name get login data and create the function. Okay, now here we are first going to get our Excel. So I will say string file path. You can give any name here, and here we are going to get the location of our Excel file. Now in our case, our Excel file is within our project folder in a folder called test data. So you can see our Excel file is here. So I can either just say test data and test data.xlsx. However, it will be very handy if we use the complete absolute path. So I will say system.getProperty user.dir. This will get the absolute path, and then from in this we are going to append this relative path relative to our project folder location. So I will say system.getProperty user.dir, and then we are going to just append this. Okay, let me also expand this. Okay, then after this we will load Excel. We will say Excel utils dot load Excel file path and the sheet name. So here we are calling, the Excel utils class dot the load Excel function, and you can see the load Excel function that we created in our Excel utils needs a file path which is of type string and the sheet name. So here I will give the file path and the sheet name, which is sheet 1. Okay, you can also check this. If you go to your Excel file and open it, the name of the sheet, first sheet, is sheet 1. So by default it is sheet 1. In case you rename it, you can do a right click here, and if you rename it, you can also give that name. Okay, and I have already told you that it can also be a sheet number, but we are using name as of now. Okay, so this is done, and then we will say get the row count. I will say int row count, again by using the Excel utils function get row count, and we are going to now get the data. So I'm saying object, and we can give some name. Let us say data equals new object, and here we are going to say row count -1, and here we are saying 2. So what does this mean is, so here we need to give the row number and the column count here. Okay, now here in this 2D object array, we know columns are fixed, which is 2, and we are saying row count -1. We are taking one less row than the total number of rows because our first row is going to be the header row. Okay, we don't need to consider the first row as it is the header row. Therefore, we are saying row count -1, and column is fixed because we know we have two columns, username and password. Therefore, we are saying row count -1 and 2. Okay, and then we will use if block after this. So here you can see we are using a for loop, and we are running the loop until the row count. Okay, until 1 less than the row count. So I will say for int I equals to 1 and until I is less than row count and I plus plus. So what it's happening here is we are going to run a loop starting from 1 until 1 less than the row count. For example, if we have 4 rows, then it will run 3 times. Okay, as we don't need the first row, which is a header row, and after every run of this loop, after every iteration, it will keep on incrementing I by 1, so that it will run from 1 until the 1 less than the row count, whatever we get. So you can now see in this particular Excel, when we get the row count, we will get 4 because we have 4 rows. However, we don't have to consider this row. We will have consider these 3 rows. Okay, and we are not starting from 0, but we are starting from 1 because 0 is 0, index position 0 corresponds to this row, and we don't need this row. We want from index position 1, 2 and 3. So row count will be 4. It will run from 1, 2 and 3, and as it becomes equals to 4, it will come out of the loop. Okay, because this condition will be false when it comes to 4, when I will be 4 less than 4 will be false, and it will come out of this loop. Okay, and in this loop what we are going to do is we are going to get the cell data. So we are saying here data is our 2D object array that we have declared here, and we will run it from I -1 0 Okay, and we will say equals Excel utils and dot get cell data, and we will say I and 0. Okay, so you can see this get cell data that we had already created. If I press Ctrl on my keyboard and hover over this function, it turns into a link. And if I open this, you can see this is the function to get the cell data. It takes the row number and the column number as the input parameters, and here we are saying row number will be equal to whatever I is, so it will start from 1. So first time it will say it is 1, 1 and 0, that will correspond to this particular data. This is column 0 and row 1. Okay, so it will get this data, and this is 0 here. Okay, so this will get our first username. Similarly, we are again going to get it from the next column. So we will say data, and again I minus 1, and this time the next column, which is of index position 1, equals to Excel utils dot get cell data, and here we are saying I and 1. Okay, so this will get us the first password. Okay, and when this will run for the next time, I position will be 2 here, so this will get the next row user and password from this row, and then when it will be 3, it will get this username and password, and then it will come out of the loop. As the index, as the number of count of I becomes 4, it will come out of the loop. Okay, so this is done, and then we will also call after the loop we will call the close Excel function. Okay, and then we are just going to return the data object. So this is what we need, return data. So you see in the data we also need to add the throws declaration here. Yeah, now it is all fine. So you see the return of this function is a 2D object array, that is data, which will have all our data, that is username and passwords from our Excel file. Okay, and one very important thing is we have to annotate this function by the annotation at data provider and give it some name. Okay, this is a test-ng annotation. So I will say here this function is a data provider function. I will say data provider. If I press Control space on my keyboard, I'm getting this auto completed, and if you see the imports, you will see that this is coming from this test-ng annotations data provider, and here in the brackets we will say the name of this data provider function is login data. You can give any name here, and this is what we will also be using in our test function. Okay, so we are done with our data provider function here. Now we will use this data provider in our test function. So what we have to do is wherever we want to use this data, we have to add this annotation along the add test annotation. We have to update our add test annotation to also provide the data provider, and then we have to add these arguments as the input arguments of the function. So I will say here this is our function test valid login where we want to use it. So I will say data provider, and if you press Control space, we are also getting this option data provider equals whatever name you have given, make sure that you give the same name here. This data provider is login data. Okay, and in the input arguments of the function I will take two parameters, username and password of type string. So whatever comes as a return of this is a 2D array, and that will be taken as two strings, username and password, and this is what we will be using in our test data. So instead of hard coding this, let me just comment, or I'm just going to copy and paste this again, and I'm going to comment this one. You can also remove this. I'm keeping it just for reference. Okay, I selected these two lines and pressed Control and / on my keyboard to comment this, and here in place of this hard-coded value, I'm going to say username, and here I'm going to say password. Okay, and save it, and rest of the things remain same. These are the two things that we have changed. We have added the data provider here and also taken these input arguments, and this we will update in place of the hard-coded data here. Okay, make sure that you save it. So this is what we have done here. You can also check this is what we have done, and the rest of the things remains as it is. All right, now we are going to run and check. So let's run and see. So in this case here, let me also comment this other test function so that we can just focus on our single function and see if it is working fine with our test data. Okay, so here this is our test. You can do a right click here and say run as test-ng test, or just click on this run button. So let's see what happens here. Now it should run with the test data that we have added in our Excel file, and because we have 3 sets of data, let us see if it runs the test 3 times or not. So it has started and it opens the browser, and you can see this is the first run. It used user1, which is fine. It is running the second time, it is using user2 here, which is also fine, and now the third time here it is using the correct credentials, and this is all working fine. Okay, so this is all fine. Also, let us go and check. If I see the test-ng results, you can see we have 2 fail and 1 pass. So this is all fine. And also let me see the reports. Reports we had already seen in the earlier session, but let me just very quickly check if it also created the report, and yes, we have got the report here. And if I try to open and check it, I will open it with our browser, and you can see here we have got here 3 tests, 2 are fail and 1 is pass. Okay, and in the failed test we also have got our screenshot added. So this we have already learned in the earlier session where we learned how to create HTML reports and add the screenshots. So this is also working fine with external test data. Okay, and one more thing that you can do is in the report we are seeing the name as login test for every test. If you want to update this as well, and if you want it to be more meaningful, what we can do is in our test function where we are adding this in our report, where we are saying starting login test, or this is what we are doing. So here where we are creating the test, yes, this is create test. Here we can also append the, let us say, the username, so we will know that this particular test is using this particular username. So just for easy reference in reports. And now the good thing is, now we don't have to manage our data within the script from our code. We can manage it from here, and we can now use any data. We can add more rows, and it will run to the equal to the number of times we add the rows. So let us say if I add one more row here and I add some invalid username and password, and I'm just saving it. I've saved this and I'm going to run again and check if it runs now 4 times. So I will just run it and let us see what happens this time. So now this should run 4 times. So you can see now I have not made any changes in our script. I just added a new set of data in our Excel file. So this was the first run. This is the second run, user2, the third run, which is valid credentials. And now one more time, the fourth run again with invalid credentials. Okay, so this is all running fine. And if I go and refresh the reports folder, we have got this report also here generated. And if I open with a web browser, you can now see we have got 4 tests, and now this time in the test name we are getting this username appended, so it is easy to refer these tests now. And this one is pass and others are failed. Okay, so we are done with this. Now I have also already shown you that in case you want to check and refer my separate video where I have shown how to read and write Excel, this is the link of the video. I will keep it in the description as well, and this is the video. So this is what you can see. Okay, now after this, in case now if you have lots of data and you want to manage your data from an external file, maybe you want to give it to a separate team to manage the data, you don't want that you make any changes in the script and there are frequent changes in data and the data is very large, then it's recommended that we use a separate file like Excel or CSV like we have done now. But in case there is a very limited set of data and you don't have to change it often, so we also have an option to create a data provider method within our script, within our code, and we can get our data from there. Okay, so let's create a data provider method and we will annotate it with the TestNG annotation at data provider. So here we can create it within our test script. So let us say I will go here and I'm in our login test itself. Here just before the test function I can do it. You can do it anywhere, but let me do it here. I'm saying I'm creating a function called get data and the return type is a 2-dimensional array. So I will say public, this is the return type 2D array and the name is get data. Okay, and here we are saying return new object which is a 2D array. I'm saying return new object and we are going to create it right here. Okay, so here we are saying within curly brackets I will say user1 pass 1 and then give a comma and I can add more like this, so you can keep on adding. So similarly I'm just copying this and pasting it here, so I have more sets here. I will say this is user2 pass 2 user3 pass 3. Okay, and you can keep on adding it like this, and this is what we have created, and make sure that we annotate it with this annotation at data provider and give it some name. So I will say this is again a data provider function. So there can be multiple data provider functions also within a code, and I will say name is let's say login data 2. Okay, and save it. Now in the test function I will change the data provider from login data to login data 2 so that it will now use this instead of our earlier function where we were getting the data from Excel. Okay, so see here we just need to give it the name of the data provider and based on that it will get the data from that particular function. It doesn't matter whether it is from Excel or scripted data within the script. We just have to tell it from which function to use to get the data from. Okay, and that particular function should return the data in the format that we have to use it. So here we have two values, therefore we are passing a 2D array here, and that is what we are returning here. Okay, now we have already done step number 2, that is we have annotated the test function. So we have added this annotation here, and in the test function we have updated the data provider. Okay, so this is what we have done. Okay, you can also print it out just for your reference in the console, but we already have a complete test. We can run it and check it. Okay, so let us see this first, and I will run and see. So this time it should run 3 times using these 3 sets of data that we have in our data provider function. So this is the first run, and the second run, it is working fine, and the third run, so here it is using user3 pass3. So of course this will fail because these are invalid credentials, but we are able to use this data provider function. Now similarly, we also have an option to get our data from our testng.xml. Okay, so if you see here, we have testng.xml. In case you don't find this, you can just go to your function, to your project folder, and then do a right click and say new and say file and give it some name. I will say okay, the name has to be testng.xml only. Okay, for now I already have testng.xml, so I will say testng1.xml and say finish, and we have got this file here, and here it is throwing error because it needs a data of XML format. So if I go to my testng.xml, the earlier file, I have this data here. Let me just copy and paste it here so that it does not throw error. So testng.xml is the file that we can use to run our tests based on the configuration that we provide in this XML file. Okay, so now we are going to use testng.xml file so that we can pass the data from here. There are so many things that we can do with testng.xml file. We can do parallel executions, we can manage in suites, we can do a lot of things. We can also do parameterization, but for now let us see how do we use testng.xml to pass the parameters. So we are going to modify our testng.xml file to pass the parameters. Okay, so this is the XML file. So this is how we will be using it. So we are going to say suite name, and we can give any suite name here. Okay, then we will say test name. You can give any test name here. Now in case you just want to copy all this from my project, you can see this is my project GitHub link. I will also keep this link in the description of the video. You can get it from there as well. You can refer the code or copy anything, or you can create yourself. Okay, then here we are going to use parameters. So after this I will create a tag for parameters. I will say parameter and name value. I will say parameter, and then I will say name equals username, value equals admin, or whatever value I want. Okay, I will say username 1, and or this I will just keep username because this is what we will be using in our function, and its value is username 1. Okay, so this is how we will create it, and then similarly we can keep on adding more parameters as much as we like to. Let me just add one more. So we have 2 sets of parameters here. So this is password, and I can give any value here. So here we have username and password. We can also add more sets here. Okay, and then we have to specify what class and what function we have to run. So here we give the package name, which is this, and in this we have the login test class. So we will give the class name like this. Okay, so here this is the package name and the class name that will be running. Sorry, this is the one, package name and class name, and here we are using the parameters. Okay, now this is half of the things are done. We also need to update our test login test.java. So this testng.xml will pass username admin and password admin123, or in our case username 1 and password pass1 to login_test.java. And now step number 2 in login_test.java, we will use the add parameters annotation. So here wherever you want to use it, you will have to use add parameters and then use this username and password there. So here let me go to login_test.java. Okay, now here instead of data provider, or let me just comment this out, and I'm just commenting this out so that I can refer it later. If you want, you can also remove it, and I will say add test, and then I will say add parameters. This is a separate annotation. I will say add parameter. Again, this should be coming from testng, and I will say here in the parameters, I will say username and password within curly brackets. Okay, so I will say here username and password. Okay, and save it, and make sure this username and password is same as what we have given in our testng parameter name, testng.xml parameter name. Okay, so this should match so that it can refer it from here. So now this time we should be getting our data from the parameters of our testng.xml file. So let us run and check. I will run this, save and run. So this should run 2 times. Let me see. I think there was some error. I will quickly check it. Okay, it is saying parameter username is required and but has not been marked as optional or defined. Okay, let me very quickly check what we have done here. Okay, sorry, that was my mistake. So now as we have updated everything in our testng.xml file, we now have to run this file. Okay, we don't have to run it from our test, we have to run this file. Okay, so this is what we will be doing here. I have to run this file, so I will do a right click here, make sure that you have saved everything and say we have run as testng suite, and let us see if it works now. So yes, it is starting the WebDriver and opens the browser, and yes, this is the first one, and of course it is only one parameter we have used, that is 2 parameters but one set of test data, that is username and pass1, and that has run fine. And of course it will fail because these are invalid, so we are able to run it using our testng.xml. Okay, so here are different ways we can use our test data. We can use it from an external file, we can also create the data within a function and make it data provider, or we can also use parameters from testng.xml file. I hope this was useful. I will meet you in the next session. Thank you for watching and never stop learning.